Are you claiming today that you were wrongfully accused and you're innocent of this charge?
I'm not claiming, I'm stating the truth. I cannot lie. I cannot accept responsibility for any good or any bad, whatever it is, before I said, because if I do, like I say, I'm selling my soul to the devil, and I'll never reach heaven.
Well, that's the October 2024 parole hearing for a man who is facing life for 2 counts of first-degree homicide. He took 2 lives. It's always an interesting case for someone to get up and insist on their innocence. That is not a good strategy for getting paroled. But before we watch this hearing, we are going to take a blast to the past, to his 2020 commutation hearing. With that, let's jump in.
So you are, you're welcome. You are Mr. John Tonnaby. You're classified as a first felony offender. You were sentenced May 26, 1981 for 2 counts of first-degree murder. You're serving a life sentence. You're here this afternoon because requesting immediate parole eligibility after having submitted an application for clemency, requesting a commutation of your sentence. Mr. Tonnaby, is that information correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Marabella.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Tonnaby, my name is Tony Marabella. I'm going to ask a few questions. Before I do that, I guess I'd like to recognize a couple of friends. Ms. Julie Cullen, I've known for many years, and of course, Mr. Lancaster with the law school and the project. So I've got friends on both sides. So just want to recognize them. I haven't seen them in a while. Mr. Tonnaby, you've been in prison, as I understand it, for 40 years. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about some of the programs that you've done while you've been there.
Mainly the first program I got into was in the religious programs here under the chaplaincy, which was very helpful in getting me on the path of recovery and rehabilitation, and to strengthen my outlook on life and everything. And then I got into one other little class, I believe it was effective listening, which was very important, because I find that a lot of people I have a problem when somebody's talking, thinking about something else rather than what I'm listening to. It's been very helpful. The substance abuse class definitely was very helpful to me, to cause me to understand more about the use of substances, drugs and alcohol, which I never used drugs or alcohol.
Tell me a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about your alcohol use.
Okay.
When did you start drinking alcohol?
I was kind of young. I was kind of young when, like on a Saturday night, that was back in the country, that was, part of the little program, little drink here, beer here and there. And then as, as going on, as I come up in life and everything, it was a kind of a social thing, more or less, than anything else. And then sometimes of course, you drink one beer, and it takes 10 beers to make you drunk. You're 1/10 drunk. I've come to realize under these programs that we have.
Tell me the things that you've learned about your drinking since you've been in prison with the programs.
Mainly the fact that most people, including myself, think that if you're not an alcoholic to the point you drink to a stupor, that's all right. You're not a problem to yourself and nobody else. But I find these programs have taught me that definitely that is a problem, because it leads to, or opens the door for, worse things.
How often were you drinking before you came to prison?
Usually it would be on after work on a Friday or Saturday.
This particular incident occurred on a weekend or what?
Yes, I believe it was Friday night.
Okay.
on a
Were
Friday
you
night.
drinking, were you drinking that night?
Yes, sir. I had been drinking. Yes.
How much had you been drinking?
I had drank. I was tired and sleepy. I was waiting to get back to my camp, our camp where I was staying, and I had quit drinking, but had been drinking. I don't know how often, how much over the period of time that I was there.
Have you learned since you've been in prison that you are an alcoholic or not? What is your thought about that?
Well, in attending AA, I find that I am an alcoholic and a recovering alcoholic, because it's been shown that once you're
Did we lose you? I believe
Back,
we've
give me just a
lost.
moment.
problems and
There he is.
who can help you with that.
Mr. Toneby, I've read your file in its entirety, and it seems to me that you deny you had anything to do with this. You deny you did this. Is it possible that you were drunk and don't remember what you did?
You hear us? Hello? Can you hear us? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Marabella, you froze up for a few minutes.
Oh, did I? Oh,
Well, I don't know if it was ours or yours, but we can hear you now.
okay. Mr. Toneby, is it possible that you were drunk the night this happened and you just don't remember what happened?
It's hard to believe that I was, but I suppose it could have been possible, because some people have told me that might have happened. That might have been what happened. That I might have been out of it.
There are a lot of people who are in opposition to your getting any relief here, primarily because of what happened. What do you say to them?
Well, it's a very has been a very something that's been heavy on my mind. My life, everything has been affected by it. I'm sure that definitely know that it has been affecting theirs, and it is a gruesome thing to have to be thought about, and especially for a loved one. And I know that they have grieved and suffered greatly throughout the years over this. And I also have grieved over the same situation, knowing that they have grieved. And my efforts to better myself and I can't change what happened in the past, but I can change the future for myself and maybe other people through what I've experienced. And I definitely want them to know that if I could give my life for it, I could do it. I would do it.
Mr. Toneby, you've been in prison for 40 years, and it looks like you've had 6 write-ups. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would want me to know before I decide how to vote? What would you like to say to the victims' families here? What would you like to say to them?
Well, I would like to say that I didn't know any of those people involved in this situation. I didn't know anything. There was no hate or any kind of altercation that I recall ever happening. And there was a lot of questions that I have that was not answered during the process of the investigation, and a lot of confusion. There was a lot of conjecture and suspicion and things that were said by the sheriff's department and the news media reported that was not true. because I say it's not true because it wasn't in the record. They never brought things up like that in the trial. At the original prosecution, original trial, when they originally,
Mr. Tonabee, let me tell you what my concern is, okay?
Okay.
You seem to express significant remorse. Earlier, you seem to express that your alcohol could very well have caused or been a contributing factor for you having committed these crimes.
yes, sir.
Now you're kind of going back to, well, I didn't do it. They set me up. That's kind of hard for me to accept.
Okay.
Now, do you accept the fact that you committed these crimes and you are responsible for the death of these two people?
I am responsible for whatever I had to do with that. Yes, sir. And I have grieved over this situation every day of my life when I woke up in the morning, every day, and knowing that those people hated me for it. And I certainly do accept responsibility. Yes.
I think that's all the questions I have, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marabella. Mr. Wise?
I would like to hear from, hey, Warden, where does he work at and where does he stay in at, Warden? I'd like to hear the comments from Warden.
He lives at Camp F, and he's in a dorm orderly at F because of his age.
Yeah. Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Jones? I'm sorry, Mr. Jones.
No questions at this time.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Roche?
Good afternoon, Mr. Tonabee. How are you?
I'm real fine, sir. How are you doing, sir?
Good. I know it's been 40 years, but what happened to your vehicle on that night? You borrowed a truck, am I right?
Yes, sir.
Where was your vehicle that night?
I didn't have one. I didn't have a vehicle. I
So
had
you
borrowed the truck.
So you borrowed somebody's truck
Yes, sir.
and you lent that truck to a friend of yours.
Yes.
So you borrowed somebody's truck and then you let someone else use it.
I understand, sir.
I just need to understand, why would you give somebody property that you borrowed to someone else and you were responsible for it?
Well, the only explanation I have is that obviously I was out of it enough to my judgment was definitely impaired during part of the day, most of the day, and lack of sleep and everything. And my judgment definitely was impaired. But and I know that is it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense to me that I did that. Now I come to Louisiana on a job looking for it. Went on a job, and I didn't have a car, and I was using my boss's friend's pickup, and the guy asked me to use it, and I did. I just that's the only thing I can explain.
You told Mr. Marabella that you didn't know the victims.
No,
Is it possible that you met the victims in the bar that night?
the woman was in the bar that night, yeah, but I didn't know her. I didn't know her at all.
Did you interact with the lady?
Yeah. Well, everybody was interacting with each other. Yes, sir. I had spoken to her. Yes.
Okay. Madam Chairman, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roche. Warden Vanoy, is there any other input from you?
I think Mr. Marabella went through everything. Trustee at F only sits right up.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so we'd like to hear, I guess is Melissa Kress. We'd like to hear from you.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Melissa Kress, and John Tonabee is my uncle. He is my mother's baby brother. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old when he went to prison. But sometime in my childhood, my mother encouraged me to start writing to him. You had known my mother. She was a good judge of character. And obviously, she knew that he was a good man, or she would not have encouraged me to write to him. So we just continued to write to each other. He has encouraged me in every way possible through Bible scriptures, and talked to me about not drinking or smoking or just whatever you could imagine that a young girl needed to hear. He was telling me those things growing up. One of the things that stand out the most to me about him is that when I was about 28, my mother passed away with a massive heart attack, and I was completely lost. I didn't know what to do. My daughter was 6 years old at the time, and my son was a year old, and I was just lost without her. And so he encouraged me to give the love that I had for my mother to God. And so that's what I've done. I've been able to just continue a relationship with God, and just worked in the church and in my community, and helped out however I can to encourage others, just as he has done for me. I'm forever grateful to my uncle. I have 7 other siblings here in Oklahoma, and we are all more than happy to help him if he was released however we could, just to encourage him and help him find resources available to him. He also has a son, Jerry Tonaby, and he is living in Texas, and he is willing to help him as well however he can. So it is, just our hope that you will consider releasing him. And so I thank you.
Thank you for joining us from Oklahoma. Thank you. We appreciate it. Mr. Rainey, can we hear from you, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Parole Board. I really appreciate y'all giving me the opportunity to speak to you. What I have to say about John is that I've been friends with him for a little over 20 years. Started out, I met him at Camp F while I was a facilitator there, Bible facilitator there, teaching scripture, Bible studies. And I consider myself a pretty good judge of character. And John, to me, is a very, very good man. He's not what he was 20 years ago. He's not what he was 40 years ago. He is a new man. And I really appreciate John, being a friend with John. I think he's a good candidate for the outside life. He would be very helpful to other people. He's in a position knowledgeably to help people with problems if they have, and helping other people that have gone through the same troubles that he's gone through, and very willing. John is a very friendly type of person. I can't say enough about him, but I do appreciate y'all giving me this opportunity. I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
I apologize. I was still on mute. Thank you, sir, for spending some time with us this afternoon and sharing those remarks. We appreciate it. At this time, we'd like to hear from Ms. Dufresne. Is it Denise?
Yes.
Would you introduce yourself and tell us your relationship to the victim?
Yes, I'm Denise Dufresne. I'm Leo Dufresne's oldest daughter.
Okay.
And we were 5 in our family, and when my dad was killed, 2 of us were still minors. He was 47 years young. My mom lost the love of her life at 48. And this has been really hard on her for the last 40 years. I'll tell y'all a little bit about who my dad was. My My dad has 11 grandchildren who were never able to meet him. Well, I think 4 of them met him, but they can't remember him. We'll never know what a wonderful grandfather he could have been. We lost a father that no matter what or how busy he was, he always made time for family. He loved his family and his community. Spent as much time as he could with us and called it building memories. He had to sell the family restaurant after he died because she couldn't stand to be at the place where all the memories of him were. My dad was a dreamer, and he was in the process of making his dreams a reality. But most of all, he was a man who knew how to love. He loved his family and his community. The ferry accident happened at Luling. He was out there helping to rescue and save people and pick up the bodies that didn't make it. He also sent us back to the restaurant to bring food and hot coffee because it was cold, and he wanted to make sure that the people working there were going to be fed and kept warm. When my mom was giving birth to my second oldest brother, there was an accident and a woman came in and needed a blood transfusion. They didn't have her blood type, but my dad was type, I think it's O positive, that works for everybody. He was giving transfusions while my mom was giving birth to save the woman's life. There was a barge accident, and one of the men he was working with fell overboard and under the barge. My dad dove in to save him. That's the kind of man he was. And the night he died, he was trying to help Miss Odom, who he saw had collapsed on the side of the road. He was trying to help her and save her life when he was killed. He didn't stop, he didn't have to help her, but that's just the kind of man he was. I think if he had any regrets about that night, it's that he was unable to save her, not that he died trying. And as far as Mr. Tonby, after he killed my dad, was arrested and put into jail, was let out on bond. Did he stick around until the court date? No, he took off. They had to track him down and bring him back for trial. He had no remorse. I feel like he has remorse, except for himself. He stopped at the restaurant after he killed my dad. He went in our restaurant and was watching the cops run around, and they're asking, well, what's going on? He asked my sister what was going on. He knew. My dad and Miss Odom did not give a second chance. They will not ever have a second chance. And I don't think he should have one either. I'm sorry. I'm glad he found God. And I hope he meets him and God can forgive him, but I can't. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dufresne. Ms. Cullen, we'd like to hear from the
Thank you.
prosecutor.
Yes, I was the original one of two of the prosecutors on the case when it went to trial. It was an attorney general's office case because the district attorney had been recused because his wife was in fact related to the Dufresne family. I retired and I'm no longer employed with the attorney general's office. So I want to make it clear I'm not speaking on behalf of the current attorney general's office, but rather as the original prosecutor. This case is horrendous. I mean, the photographs, the evidence in this case was just horrible. Miss Odom apparently was very intoxicated. And although Mr. Tonby says he didn't know her and maybe people in these various bars were interacting with each other, the sheriff's office took statements from a number of witnesses. I don't know if it was 7 or 6, but people who had been at Blondie's Lounge and the Old Green Door Lounge, a couple of bars. Anyway, they interviewed everybody. And to a person that they interviewed, the people who were at Blondie's when Pauline Odom left that bar all said she was with Wayne. She was with a guy named Wayne. They described him. One man actually even gave the name Wayne Thompson, that he knew him as. He told them who he worked for. And that was how the sheriff's office was able to eventually locate Mr. Tonby. I know Mr. Tonby has stuck with this story about he borrowed someone's truck and then he loaned it to someone else. That was never able to be shown to have one bit of truth to it. The truck was never linked to any other person. And the horrible thing about this truck, or one of the horrible pieces of evidence concerning the truck, is that when Miss Odom and Mr. Dufresne were struck, Miss Odom's hair was wrapped around the drive shaft, and Mr. Dufresne's shirt was wrapped around the drive shaft. Now, Miss Odom's body apparently did not travel very far because she was located right on the side of the road. Mr. Dufresne's body, however, was not even found for like 6 hours later. This accident, alleged accident, this crash, this murder happened around 11 o'clock in the evening. So obviously it was dark out there on Highway 90. However, although there were numerous law enforcement personnel out there trying to figure out exactly what had happened, no one knew where Mr. Dufresne was. His car was parked on the side of the road where he had parked to help Ms. Odom. However, he was nowhere to be found. The sheriff's deputies, even in the hours following the initial investigation, went to family members of Mr. Dufresne to try to find out where he was. Around 5 o'clock that morning, the following morning, when the sun started coming up and the canvas and the investigation at the scene was still going on, Mr. Dufresne's body was located about 147 feet away. He had been dragged under the vehicle. His family was not able to have an open casket at his funeral, and the shirt that was wrapped around the drive shaft was determined to have been Mr. Dufresne's shirt. Also, one of Mr. Dufresne's shoes had been found on the side of the road, just one, which indicated that he had been struck pretty hard to literally knock him out of his shoes, and then he was dragged. What's most important about this incident, or equally as important, I think, is a crime or evidence of events that Mr. Tonabee did that he was not tried for. There was another young man and his friend who saw Miss Odom wandering or staggering across Highway 90. They had stopped to help her, and that prior to Mr. Dufresne driving up. So when Mr. Dufresne got there, he suggested to one of these young men to go back to either the restaurant or somewhere to call the police and let them know what was going on. The other young man stayed at the scene. Well, after his friend had left, Mr. Tonabee came up to this young man who was not facing him at the time and hit him on the head with some type of metal object. It was later determined to have been a lug wrench that was found inside the red and white pickup truck with blood and hair on it. They knew where, the sheriff's office knew where Mr. Tonabee was staying, at least periodically, and they went there and they found him, and they spoke to the roommate, the owner of the truck, who said, yeah, he had given the truck to Tonabee, but Tonabee was back at the trailer and the truck wasn't there, and nobody knew where the truck was. No one has ever been able to provide any kind of evidence to verify Mr. Tonabee's story that he wasn't driving that truck. Everything in this case, he was linked to Pauline Odom by a number of witnesses on the scene. He was linked to the truck. He was linked to the death of these two people by the evidence that was wrapped around the drive shaft of the truck. This family has been devastated. Ms. Dufresne is now 88 years old. Luckily, she's still with us, but she's had to live with this for so long. And children have some of her family has died, and her grandchildren now, as Denise had said, have never had an opportunity to meet their grandfather. Mr. Dufresne, I'm not from St. Charles Parish, but at the time this trial was taking place and when the investigation was still going on, you have no idea how many people came up to us from the Attorney General's office to make sure we knew what a good person Mr. Dufresne was and how loved he was in the community and what an asset he had been to the St. Charles Parish community. So I just wanted y'all to know, obviously his family can tell you more about him than I can, but it was not just a family member that was talking about him. It was a number of people. And this was a devastating incident And again, to this day, even today with what Mr. Tonabee is saying, he's not admitting having been involved in any of this. He's saying whatever role he played, he's taking responsibility for, but he's not taking responsibility for running over two people, for doing absolutely nothing to him, and for hitting another young man over the head for doing absolutely nothing to him. He's being a little disingenuous with talking about drinking. I think drinking did have something to do with this, not as an excuse for his behavior, but again, just to kind of put things in the context of what was going on that night. As the former prosecutor in this case, I am opposing clemency at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Cullen. We appreciate your input. I think that's all those who've indicated they'd like to speak. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Renatza. And if I can close at the end, if Mr. Tonabee has a statement that he would like to give the board.
Okay, good. Mr. Tonabee, we'd like to hear your statement.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I want to say that still I understand the point that the family and everything, but the prosecutor is very mistaken in what she prosecuted. She done such a good job. She created evidence of blood, matching blood, and all these things, which the jury fell for, which I understand. Later on, there was no blood taken from no victims. No victims received the blood. People did not receive any blood to test. There was no matching. There was no evidence of any hair around what she said, but Mr. Dufresne's shirt was on the drive shaft, okay? I just want to give you just a brief summary of the police reports that they had at the time of this incident. There was
Mr. Tonabee, we do have that information in the records that were provided to us. We already have that information, so I don't think it's really necessary for you to go over that information with us this afternoon.
All right. Let me just say this. I really have appreciated all the programs that I've had participated here at Angola. They have done such a great job of causing me to understand what it is and what happens when a person drinks or does such things. It would bend the mind or whatever. I have been able to experience other people's same problems that I've had. Many people here have had the same problems and resulted in their imprisonment because relating to their drinking or their habits in the street. And I guarantee you that that doesn't make any difference. I'm sure I guaranteeing you, but it does make a difference to me because I know that I will never drink again. And I will definitely promise you that if you ever let me out of this place, I will always do what I think is right in the eyes of people and the God.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Lancaster?
Thank you. Mr. Tonabee comes before you as 78 years old. He has been in prison for 40 years. And he's in prison as a first offender. He is a veteran of the Air Force. And while he's been in prison, he has worked to address the issues which brought him here, primarily his drinking and his alcoholism. And he talked today about how he is in recovery and how he's committed to that recovery. If he's ever released, one part of his plan would be to continue that on the outside. And I understand how challenging this case can be. I read a lot of the police reports that were available to me, parts of the record in this case. And it is a very confusing case. The facts in this case are circumstantial. They're confusing. Even Justice Watson of the Louisiana Supreme Court, when he wrote a dissent on direct appeals, talked about sort of the lack of evidence and the circumstantial nature of the evidence and how this type of incident could be just as much negligent homicide as it was first degree murder, just the uncertainty of that in his vote on dissent to grant a hearing. So looking at this case, given all of that factual uncertainty and looking who Mr. Toneby is today, he is very different than who he was 40 years ago. He is a Class A trustee and has held that status for 34 years, since 1986. And I think that's remarkable. He is a low risk. I believe his latest Larna has him at a -4. He's been very engaged in the religious community at Angola, and his involvement in religion has really redirected his life. He's been engaged in Cowboys for Christ, 6 total write-ups in 40 years. The first 5 of those were really in the first 10 years of his incarceration, around that first decade. His last one was 17 years ago. And for that one, he only got a loss of canteen for 4 weeks. It was an incident in a chow hall. It was a 7 and a 3 for disrespect and defiance, but that was 17 years ago. So he's really been a model prisoner while he has been at Angola. His plan for release, if he is given the opportunity and at his parole hearing is granted early release, his plan would be to go to the Louisiana Parole Project. There is a letter that I submitted from Carrie Myers indicating that they've accepted him as a client. They'll work with him prior to his release to get him situated and prepared. If he is released, they'll provide him services on the outside and assist with an eventual transition to live with his son, Jerry, in Garland, Texas. Jerry's committed to having him in his home. He has a 4-bedroom home, a room for Mr. Toneby where he would have his own private bedroom. Jerry is actually a car salesman, indicated that he would, if Mr. Toneby needed transportation, that he could provide that transportation. You heard from Ms. Kress, who is in Oklahoma. He has many family in Oklahoma. The Choctaw Nation is only about an hour and a half away from where he would be in Garland, Texas. They have obligated themselves to support him and provide him with services of their tribe. So he does have a solid plan should he be given the opportunity for release. Based on what he has done in the 40 years while he's been at Angola, addressing the issues of his alcoholism, continuing to work on his recovery, his commitment to that, the fact that he is a Class A trustee for 34 years, very low risk, a good plan for release. We ask that this board grant him clemency, his sentence at 99 years with immediate parole eligibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Appreciate that. Mr. Marabella, are you ready to cast your vote?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Toneby, all cases that come before us are very difficult. Your case, I have to say, is one of the most difficult cases that I sit on. And it's because you're failing to recognize what you did. And you're failing to recognize and accept responsibility for what you did. I hear what Mr. Lancaster has to say, and it may very well be that a judge could have said, maybe this wasn't a murder, maybe it was negligent homicide. The bottom line is it was you who did this, regardless of how it happened. and you refuse to seem to accept that. You have done some really terrific things since you've been locked up. You've recognized your drinking, you've recognized your alcohol problem. You apparently have done many, many good things. You've been a trustee for 34 years. However, today it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but all that I've read today, you're saying today that alcohol may have contributed to what happened that night, and you accept responsibility for it. I'm not sure you've said that before publicly. Maybe you have. I didn't get that impression, and that's a big step. I think it is a big step. Regardless of whether we call it murder, whatever we call it, you are responsible for the death of those two people. You are responsible for all of the pain that has been elicited here today. You have to accept that and understand that. Our job is not to retry the case and not to do all of those things. It's to determine who you are and what you are today. The things that you have accomplished while you've been in prison, the things that you've done, the programs you've done, the recognition of your alcoholism says a lot for what you've done. My vote today, having said all of those things, is going to vote, my vote is going to be to commute your sentence to 99 years and make you parole eligible after serving 2 more years, 42 years you'll have to serve. That's the best I can do, because I believe that you still have to come to some grips to recognize your responsibility in what you did in this particular case. That would be my vote, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Marabella. Mr. Wise?
You losing?
No, you're on mute.
At this time, I'm gonna vote to commute your sentence to 99 years with parole eligibility after 42 years.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Mr. Jones?
Yes, I'm gonna vote the same with my colleagues here. I think that's my vote today, and wish you the best, Mr. Tonby.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Roche?
Mr. Tonby, some information that is gonna be responsible for my decision today was not brought out today, and I'm gonna bring it out before I give my decision. The 7 years that prior to your conviction, you were arrested in 2 different jurisdictions on 3 occasions and convicted of DWI. So long before you committed this heinous crime, you had been convicted of DWI on 3 occasions in Dallas, Texas, and Port Allen, Louisiana. Based upon adamant opposition from the legal community in the parish of St. Charles, Louisiana, vehement opposition from the victim's family, my vote is to deny your request.
Thank you, Mr. Roche. So, Mr. Tonby, you've received 3 favorable votes to commute your sentence to 99 years after and make you parole eligible after serving 42 years. 1 vote to deny. So that the outcome of today's proceedings, sir, is that we will make the recommendation to commute your sentence to 99 years to with parole eligibility after serving 42. Do you understand, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thanks, everybody who participated today.
Thank you very much.
Wow, what a surprising turn of events. It's almost like he's not taking accountability, or he's trying to pin it on, look, I didn't do it. I borrowed the truck. I lent the truck to someone else. I have no idea what you guys are talking about. And then it's like, well, was it possible you're drunk and you don't remember? And he's kind of like, this is one of the cases that it's just kind of surprised that they granted, but they did grant. And I'm not going to spend more time unpacking it. We do have Court of Appeals, which we will go over to get into the nitty gritty details. But first, let's just flash back to the present day to his parole hearing. And, as many of you know, this is the quick list that the governor, before he had left, he had commuted 56 inmates. And this is the inmate that shows up on number near the end, 2 counts of first degree red rum. I don't say that in jest, I say it for YouTube. And if some of you recall going through this list, I pointed this one out and said, man, I want to see how this guy is going to get a chance. And here it is. There's some type of convoluted mess about how it happened. Was he drunk? Was it even him? Is he claiming his innocence? How? Well, we're going to come back to the present day. Now, I want to let you know, and then we'll unpack it with the details of these appeals. Thank you, Sir Richard. Now, I cut out a good 30 minutes of this hearing. This was going to be a long hearing. Now, what I cut out was the support. He has an interim attorney that gives like an 8-minute speech. He has different. I'm not cutting them out of disrespect. I think the interim attorney did as good of a job as he can. His parents should be very proud. I also cut out some of the opposition. Now, the reason I cut out some of the opposition is because they get up on that potato of a microphone that they have there, and it's hard to hear them. And I try to make the best judgment of, do we show it and lose a lot of the audience or not? And in this case, because of how long it is, because we're tying the hearings together, I am removing it. If you want to watch the full version, it's accessible online. You can do that. And if you need help finding it, you can email me and I'll send it to you happily. But it's not out of disrespect. There is something notable who we do skip over, but again, and I only skip him over because you can't hear him. It's hard to hear him because he's live in person using a potato for a microphone, and not a good potato. It's like a cheap old potato. But what's interesting is that if I'm understanding, so he was a former warden, but if I'm understanding correctly, maybe a once upon a time parole board member. He knows Mr. Notza. They're like buddies, the way he was talking. And basically, he's been a huge advocate for getting inmates paroled. And he showed up in opposition. Now, he had some familial connection to the case through family and whatnot, but it's just for him to show up, and the way that he said it, I thought was very powerful. Even though it was hard to hear what he was saying. But I think it's important to note that that man did come up and speak, even though I am not showing him. And then we're basically jumping straight to the questioning. And I'll unpack it with going over the appeals at the end. And then 2 seconds. Of course, the Mr. No Way Roche denial, that was classic Mr. No Way Roche, pulling up the information that was overlooked. It's like, if anything, if you want to say like it was a DUI, there's something wrong with the way this guy's taking his defense. I'm shocked that they recommended him to the governor. Like, usually they want to see accountability or something. Anyways, with that, let's jump in.
Today we have for parole consideration John Turby, DOC number 98923, who's a first felony offender who was convicted of first-degree murder, 2 counts, at a trial by jury. And on May 26, 1981, was sentenced to serve life in prison in St. Charles Parish. Your eligibility date is 8/1/21. Your good time date is 4/26/29, and your full term date is 6/3/79. Does that information sound correct to you, Mr. Tunham?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the first question goes to you is, what's the reason you're here today, and why do you think we should be releasing you today?
I'm here today to meet the parole board as required by the parole board itself for parole. And I'm asking mercy on the court, on the board to grant me parole. What I can say as far as why should you grant me parole, that is something that, I can only say that I would have to say that I was charged, of course, with a first degree murder and all that and everything. And as far as being able to undo all that, I can't undo all that. But so I have to point to my 44-year prison record, and everything that's been accomplished in there, which is quite a lengthy, that shows no violence or drug related or any kind of violations that would cause them to revoke my Class A trustee status that they gave me in 1986, would be 38 years ago. I've accomplished all the requirements as as far as the rules go that I know about. All the programs, everything, in addition to having a good work record, that I had no disciplinary reports, work-related disciplinary reports in those 42 years I've been in Angola. And if there is another rule or anything that I needed to comply with, I would have complied with it. And so for these reasons, I just have to rely upon my record, the prison record, for being granted parole.
Thank you. So your case has been assigned to Board Member Renatza, who's going to ask the first questions.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Tonby.
Good morning, sir, ma'am.
How are you today?
Questionable.
Well, I wanted to, first, before I get started with asking you a couple of questions, I want to thank the Dufresne family for being here. I know you saw Miss Denise during that the pardon hearing, but I welcome everybody else who's here. It's important that you're here. Thank you, Warden Tanner, for your remarks. Thank you. Mr. Tonby, as mentioned, you were seen by a pardon hearing 4 years ago in November in 2020. You were granted a favorable recommendation, and I noted in the record that that was not a unanimous vote. You did have one vote in opposition based on the law enforcement and victim opposition that was expressed, but you received 4 votes with the remarks that you had favorable remarks by the warden. At that time, you had been a Class A trustee for 34 years. You had a low risk. You had good programs. That's what the record said, and only 6 write-ups. So when I look at your record, the only program I see at that time was the pre-release program. What other programs have you taken, so? Besides your faith-based?
I had victims awareness, and I had substance abuse, Cage Your Rage class. I had the 100-hour class, which contains all those other things that other classes I took also. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but everything that was required on the rules that I had taken all. Do you have a list of those? Yes. Okay, that would be okay. Thinking for a Change, 100-hour pre-release, anger management, values, which I guess the 100-hour class would include all these things: anger management, values classification, goal setting and achieving, personal development, problem solving and decision making, job placement assistance, reentry support resources, employment skills, money management skills, victims awareness and restitution.
So
Counseling.
excuse me, so the victim awareness program was part of that 100-hour pre-release
Yeah.
curriculum?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you had to take a standalone class that's victim awareness.
Yeah, they did have also a standalone class, yeah.
I'm a little confused. But we'll
In addition to the victims awareness under the 100-hour class.
when was that? Is there a date there? Did you finish that?
Not right here. I don't have my certificates with me either. And let's see. Anger management, let me see down here at the bottom. Anger management was April 14, 2004.
That's okay. That's okay. I understand. It has been a while at any rate. Well, tell me what you learned in that victim awareness class.
Well, I learned to consider, other people, not only everybody that had effect behind the crimes I'm charged with and everything that most people wouldn't think about. But I've learned a lot of consideration for their feelings, there's grief and everything that's associated with crime, and that more or less that they'll continue to feel those things for the rest of their lives because of the deaths of these Mr. Diafrin and Miss Odom. And I will always consider what they feel, and I know they feel anger, they feel all kinds of mixed emotions and everything that goes with it. And I share in that same mental capacity with them, although I'm sure that, I'm not saying that I'm doing anything that's going to bring the people back. But I really always feel the same, similar, not exactly as they would feel, I'm sure, the grief that they feel.
Well, as I look at your, and I voted for you at your clemency hearing. I voted favorably for you then. And you, at that time, it was commute your sentence to 99 years with parole eligibility after having served 42 years, and you served 43 years. One thing that strikes me is that you do have a good time date in April of 2029, but you will be released. There's no discretion there. You will be released. I wanted to ask you this, Mr. Tonabee. You filed several appeals over the years. You've heard from the victims and the victims' family and friends today about you don't seem to have any remorse for what you did. Do you remember at all what happened that night?
I can't. The things that they've mentioned there. I have no idea what went on. Okay, I wasn't there, and not to say that I didn't. I loaned my truck out, and the guy didn't bring it back. Okay, I can't say what happened there. As far as what has been said is, if my conviction was based upon suspicion, conjecture, just a lot of things. The rumors were going around. The things that they put in the paper that about, like Miss Denise had read out of her newspaper at the pardon board hearing was not ever anything in the trial brought out as happening that way. No testimony, excuse me. And so like I say, I cannot say anything more. I cannot plead guilty today, just like I couldn't plead guilty to murder back in the day that I was charged and arraigned and everything.
I understand that, sir.
It'd be just like
on now, Mr. Zombie. I think we'll move on.
Okay.
Talk to me today.
It's different, yeah.
Well, I noticed that you had said that you can't undo the crime. And then that immediately thereafter, you said that you were not going to drink any more alcohol again because of the DWI accident. So why was there a DWI accident, but you didn't have anything to do with it?
DWI accident?
Yeah, do you remember saying anything about you're not gonna drink any alcohol again? And
Oh,
that's
well,
why
that,
you're sober?
I made that statement to a lady that came, at the direction of one of the detectives. When I got locked up, my mother had always told me that, "No, son, don't go around bars or be drinking," okay? And when she came to me to talk about it, she said, "Why did you do it? Why did you do?" I said, "Well," I said, "I didn't do anything." I said, "But I'll guarantee you that I will never drink another drink as long as I live. Not because of what happened, but because what happened, if I hadn't been around bars or drinking, there would have been no suspicion of me at all, and these accusations that were made of me." And let me just say this, and I don't want, I'm like I say, I'm not going to state anything about my own opinion in this regard, but according to the Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Jack Watson Crozer, he studied my case closely. He said these particular words: "This case is just as compatible with negligent homicide as it is with first-degree murder. The circumstances surrounding Miss Odom is somewhat sketchy. However, as far as Mr. Dufresne is concerned, it's almost entirely silent." He said that, it's in the record. And in doing so, I'm not saying that he cleared me of anything. And he said that, but not the facts of the case, not proving that I was guilty, but because the facts of the case, whoever did this or whatever happened, was just like was negligent harm, because there was no specific intent proven in the trial. And after they had held me, Mr. Harry Morrell, the DA, he recused himself. He got out because he claimed he was related to Mr. Leo Dufresne. And then when he did, they quashed the indictment. And the court ruled, they had at a hearing ruled that they had no probable cause for holding me, and they turned me loose. I did not run. It was not a case like that. Things like this, all these rumors were spread around because no one wanted to know what was going on, whatever it was.
I'm out. There was a trial, correct? There was a
Yes.
trial and found
Yes, ma'am.
guilty? All right, so that's where we're at today.
Yes.
So we'll just fast forward from the fact that there was a trial and you were found guilty. Listen to everything that the victims had to say today, and I'm so glad that they were able to come and have their voice.
Yes.
Victim's voice is very, very important.
Yes. Yes, I understand.
A lot of times it's silent, like Miss Odom. You know, she doesn't have anybody here to speak in her behalf. And I do know, I listen to all your good works. It's in prison now. But, you know, Mr. Dufresne was doing those good works before his murder at 47 years old. He did it, and he didn't have to be put in jail in order to do it. That's just the type of person he was. He didn't have a switch that went off because well, you were incarcerated. That's when you made this decision to start helping people and turn your life over to Christ, and that's a wonderful thing. But it's a wonderful thing also that you seem to now be a spiritual leader, because even in your family, you've led people to Christ. That's a wonderful thing. And I'm sure that in the prison, you've done the same. And working with hospice takes a special personality to do that. So maybe you found your calling indirectly. But Mr. Dufresne already had his calling, and it was stolen from him. It was his family, his loved ones in his community. And so they lost a wonderful person due to a heinous crime. That's all I've got to say.
I have a question. Who is it, the person that you loaned your truck to? You said you loaned your truck to someone. Who is that person?
Well, to clarify, hadn't been down here very long. I came down on a job with a guy to come down here to do some work at an apartment complex in Mimosa Park. So I didn't know a lot of people, but everybody was friendly. everybody accepted me, like Mr. Jack Allen, his family, Miss Norman and Nays Dufresne, all those people everything. Anyway, the fella that I loaned it to was in the bar. I seen him several times, guys. He wanted to go take a bar, what's transportation down the street. And I don't know what he was going to do, but he said he's going to be right back. Well, I just, without thinking, just let him have it. And so I didn't know him personally. His name was Jim. I just know him from being around him and around in the bar. And like I say, he didn't bring it back. When he didn't come back, I was walking around trying to find the truck. It wasn't there. And so I hitchhiked down to what they call the Green Door Lounge, where my sister, my lady friend's sister lived at the time, or worked at the time, and had her call Juanita to come and pick me up. And when we left there, we went to the Mr. Captain Leo's restaurant and we ate. And then she took me to the camp where I was staying at in Bayou Gosh. And they woke me up at 7 o'clock in the morning and asked me to come down to the station to ask the questions. So I went. And as far as anything that I knew, I don't know anything about. I can't tell. If I lied to you today, it would be just like selling my soul to the devil, taking the mark of the beast, and going straight to hell. If I lied to you today, and if you asked me to lie to you, I couldn't do it to save my life. I'm not going to lie to it. If I knew anything about it, I would tell you. Yes, sir.
That you answered that question. So nobody in the bar knew who this Peter guy was. Did you help the police try to find him? I don't understand that part of the investigation.
They did. I don't understand it.
What happened there? Nobody knew him. It was like a mystery guy.
When they arrested me, they closed the case, and they didn't do any more investigation until my lawyer done some work, and then they opened it back up in August of that year. It happened in April. They opened it back up in August, and then they redone the paperwork. October, they turned me loose because they didn't have any evidence on me. That's really why they turned me loose. And then I went back to Oklahoma. I didn't run. And I come back when they re-indicted me. I came back and turned myself in. And that's the gist of the situation. There was rumors going around. The mafia was involved. The judge had to get a vest because he was afraid somebody was going to kill him. And so all these things were going on. I had no idea what was going on. I'm just new in the parish. I don't know anything about that. I had a lot of acquaintances that I thought were my friends, but they wasn't really. I mean, they was all right, but I never had anything, no beef with nobody in that parish. It was all friendly to me.
All right. And my last question is an obvious one, but I just want to hear it from you. Are you claiming today that you were wrongfully accused and you're innocent of this charge?
I'm not claiming. I'm stating the truth. I cannot lie. I cannot accept responsibility for any good or any bad, whatever it is, because if I do, like I say, I'm selling my soul to the devil, and I'll never reach heaven.
Okay. You answered that question good enough. Thank you. So that's all the questions from the board. Are we ready to vote? All right, Ms. Renata, you will be the lead voter.
Yes. Mr. Tonabee, we're not really here to determine your guilt or innocence. We accept what happened in court. You were tried by a jury. You were found guilty. And I'm aware of all the appeals because you put all that in, we have all that information in the information we reviewed. As I said, I voted for you at your Arden hearing, and none of those facts have changed, that you still maintain your Class A trustee status. You have a low risk score. You haven't had any write-ups even since then. But when your sentence was commuted, that was relief in itself. And further relief is that you have a good time date coming up. So based on all the testimony I've heard today and this very strong opposition that we see in the record, there's lots of it, and that which we've heard here today, and the proximity of your good time date. Now, I know your age, and I know that's still several years away, but my vote today is to deny based on the relief that you've already been reading.
Ms. Stapleton?
My vote today is going to be to deny. This is my reasons, because yes, you were found guilty by a jury of your peers. And it was the heinous nature and severity of the crime, law enforcement opposition, and victim opposition. Victim opposition, I want to make sure I say this right, because if you see my name, it says board member and it says victims advocate. So victims' voices are very important to me. We all want to hear it, but part of our mission statement and our vision, as outlined in Louisiana Board of Pardons and Parole guides, it says that to serve the citizens of Louisiana, addressing the needs of the victims. There's a lot of components to it, but this is one of them, and ensure crime victims have a voice in the decision-making process. So the crime victims had their voice today too. But I think you're doing a wonderful work right where you're at. And like I said earlier, prison may be your calling. And your victim, he had a calling too, and that was taken from him. So based upon all of that, the heinous nature and severity of the crime, law enforcement opposition, victim opposition, my vote for you today is.
And Mr. Tonnery, I'm going to concur with my colleagues for the same reasons. So as of today, your parole application has been denied. We'll conclude our business with Mr. Tonnery. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so he's denied. Now he does have his full term date because he was commuted in 2029, and so that's in 5 years. But man, at the age of 82, that's a long time, and it's got to feel like a little bit of a. I mean, it's what can you say? Again, he stuck with his strategy. He stuck with his strategy of claiming innocence. And do you think that he is innocent? There are parts where he comes up by saying, "Hey, you know, the D." He actually is calling the DA a liar, and he's calling, and he's trying to set the record straight all these years later. And when people do that, it does make me wonder, because you say, why would they? Why would they claim innocence knowing that it would hurt them? Having, he has attorneys with them telling him, don't do it. You got to know they're telling him, don't do it. Now, we do have a playlist that says wrongfully convicted, and I'll put this in that playlist. I'll also put it in the return of playlist. But if you want to see other cases that those who come up and insist on their innocence, for me, it always makes me wonder, because it just doesn't seem right. But at the same time, there are people who just I don't know, their egos get in the way, or do they actually believe it? It's man, it's hard to know. But you have, of course, Miss Stapleton, who says, see, it says I'm the victim's advocate, survivor advocate here. I'm going to have to stick with that. And it's, again, it's interesting how the other board fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, except for Mr. Roche, no way, Roche. Something interesting Sir Richard pointed out in this case was how the warden said this man still needs to take victim awareness class. Typically, when someone has been in this long, the wardens don't say that. So that could have been subliminal messaging in a way. Let's go through the appeal. Now we've been here, so I'm going to try to keep this under 15 minutes total, so that we're not in this too long, but I want to capture what we can. On December 22nd, 1991, River Parish Guide published an article entitled Pardon Parole Hearing Sought by Tonnaby. Wait a minute, this is the 1997. Am I in the right one? No, let's go here. I think I'm on the road. Server should provided 2 of them, but let's make sure. Okay. All right. Facts of the case. On April 19th, 1980, between 11:10 and 11:33 p.m., Pauline Odom and Leo Dolphrine were struck and killed by a vehicle on Highway 90 near Paradis, Louisiana. The St. Charles Parish Sheriff's Office had received a call regarding the body lying on the side of the road. The investigating officer discovered Pauline Odom fatally injured near the light blue automobile. Shortly thereafter, Scott Parrott and Paul Templet arrived at the scene. It was learned that the 2 young men had stopped to aid Odom, whom they had seen stumbling across the highway, apparently intoxicated. Templet remained with the woman while Parrott drove off to phone assistance. According to Templet, a middle-aged man later identified as Leo Defron stopped to assist. Templet stated that he was kneeling on the ground holding Odom's head while Dufresne was standing in front of him. Hearing footsteps behind him, he turned around and glimpsed a dark-complexioned, mustached man wearing dark clothes before he was hit on the head, rendered semi-conscious. When Parrott returned, he found Templet staggering down the highway with a gash on his head. The 2 men returned to the scene and found the police already there. Further investigations revealed that on the night of her death, Miss Odom had been drinking at Blondie's Lounge, where she was eventually refused service due to her drunken condition. A customer at the bar testified that Odom had talked casually with the defendant before reluctantly leaving the premises with him around 11 p.m. The police officers then proceeded to the defendant's residence. The house was located in a camp owned by the defendant's employer. The defendant shared the house with Royal Stapleton. Stapleton escorted the officers into the house and led into the defendant's bedroom, where the defendant was found asleep. The officers handed the defendant his clothes, and the defendant accompanied them to headquarters. Meanwhile, Royal Stapleton struck and located abandoned behind a lounge, blocking off the highway. The defendant had borrowed the truck on the day in question in front of the grill bumper. The front grill bumper was damaged. Blood, hair, and body tissue were spotted on the front of the truck, and the man's shirt was twisted around the drive shaft. The blood samples were later matched with the victim's blood, and the shirt was later identified as belonging to Leo Defrin. The blue car parked next to Odom's body was identified as belonging to Defrin. Defrin could not be located. Finally, at the dawn on April 20th, 1980, Defrin's body was discovered on the median of the highway 120 feet from the location of Odom's body. The defendant was indicted by the grand jury for first-degree murder. The prosecution was subsequently squashed because the district attorney was related to one of the victims. The attorney's general office then took charge of the case and presented it to the grand jury a second time. A second indictment was returned. On May 5th, 1981, the defendant was convicted of the 2 counts of first degree and was sentenced the following day to life imprisonment without the benefit of probation, suspension of sentence. Okay. So, I mean, it does leave room for someone, hey, it was the relative and they had the attorney general take over. It was like they were not going to lose this case type of thing. By these assignments, the defendant contends that he was arrested in his home without a warrant in violation of the Fourth Amendment, the United States Constitution. So that's one of his appeals, that they couldn't arrest him. That was unconstitutional. I'm not going to go through that part. Let's see what else he says. Something about the chain of custody of photos. Speedy trial appeal. There's a delay. I mean, I'm not seeing anything. I mean, there's not, I'm just not seeing anything like profound in his appeals. It's just so interesting. He's really claiming, his defense is that he borrowed a truck and then lent the truck to someone else and he wasn't even there. And like in the first hearing, Mr. Maribel's like, was it possible you just don't remember? He's like, maybe. But no, in this final hearing, he's insisting on his innocence. He says, I am not going to lie. I wasn't even there. Imagine if he somehow wasn't even there. How crazy would that be? I don't believe it, though. I believe the man's lying through his teeth for whatever reason. Pauline Odom was seated in Blondie's lounge next to Billy and the defendant about 10:30 p.m., approximately 1 hour before her death. Mino testifies that Miss Odom had been cut off from alcoholic beverages at the bar because of her drunkenness, and that the defendant attempted to get her to leave with him. He declared that Odom ceded to him, I don't want to leave here. I don't want any trouble. I love this place around here. I only want to be happy. Reno explained further that the defendant responded to Odom, if you want to party here all night, let them party here all night, but we're going. Either you can come along with me or I'm going to knock your butt off and take you out. Reno later saw the defendant and Odom walk out of the door together. This court has adopted Professor McCormick's definition of hearsay evidence. Let's talk about it. It's a lot of stuff, but I just don't. Let's see. 10 or 15 minutes after the killings, the defendants wandered into a bar room a short distance down the road. His damaged truck with flesh, hair, and clothing clinging to it from the collision with the victims was found a block and a half off the highway behind the bar room. Wreckage from the defendant's truck was recovered from the death scene, and human blood was found on his shirt. Louisiana rule of circumstantial evidence, assuming every fact to be proved that the evidence tends to prove in order to convict, it excludes every reasonable hypothesis of innocence. Requires support conviction. The evidence is sufficient to convince any rational trier the fact of defendant's guilt, viewing the evidence in the light of the most favorable prosecution. Both rules testify in this case, every reasonable hypothesis of the defendant's innocence is excluded by the fact that what the evidence tends to prove. No contrary hypothesis is consistent with the evidence. The evidence is sufficient to convince the rationale factor finder viewing in evidence of the light of most favorable prosecution defendant's guilt. Basically, it's like, come on, can we really believe that it wasn't him? Like, please. And it's true. He has no, like, it's like, I lent my truck. Well, who did he lend your truck to? I don't know. You know, it's just like it's just like a childish excuse. And I think maybe in his mind he just convinced himself, well, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. If I insist that I didn't do it, that I lent out my truck, then and they can't prove otherwise, then I am innocent. I mean, let's see what the other appeal here that I was going to read to you. Okay. Summary judgment. Seeking pardon hearing. This is when he was 48. This was quite so. He was looking for a pardon hearing. According to the pardon board spokesman, he applied for the hearing when no date had been set. He'd apparently been drinking a local bar early in the evening of April 19th when he was walking along US 90 Paradise Mozilla when two young men, Scott and Paul, stopped to assist her. So it's two men stopping to assist a woman. She left this. Perret left the scene to summon help, and Dufresne came along and stayed to assist. Tobin then pulled up in his pickup truck and got out and struck the two men with a lug wrench. He then got back into his truck and ran over both of them, both Dufresne and Odom. Templet was only injured and survived to tell the story to the police. It's just so barbaric. It's like he's so drunk and angry and he gets out and he hits them and then he runs them over. It's like, wow. During his trial, he claimed that he had loaned his truck to the acquaintance he called Jim. When the truck was found, a piece of Dufresne's shirt was still wrapped around the drive shaft. He was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder on May 5th, 1981, following an 11-day trial and sentenced May 26. Plaintiff filed suit against the defendants claiming that he had been defamed by the article and seeking damages resulting in the defamation. Subsequently, the defendant filed a motion for summary judgment, and the trial court granted summary judgment. A motion for summary judgment, property granted in pleadings, disposition, answers to the interrogation. What are they? So, I mean, that gave a pretty quick summary of what happened. It was interesting though, if you remember how he spoke about the DA saying that there's no such thing as blood. The only thing that was there was under the drive shaft, and that seems to be what shows up here in the appeals. But it's like he has this random alias Jim that no one knows about. Like, sorry, sir, that's just not gonna cut it. I don't believe it. I don't believe a second of it. You don't have a random, the one person, the one alibi that can save you, and all you have is a first name Jim. I lent Jim my truck. And the affidavit, both Lottinger and Gray state the following. No, that's it. I don't know if there's much more. Thank you, Sir Richard, for getting that information. The guy's guilty. I don't buy any of it. And he's just insisting on his innocence. Why do people do that? Is it a strategy? Is it ego? Do they talk themselves into believing it? I don't know. But there you have it. And with that, I'll let you go.
You have no idea how many people came up to us from the Attorney General's office to make sure we knew what a good person Mr. Dufresne was and how loved he was in the community and what an asset he had been to the St. Charles Parish community. So I just wanted y'all to know, obviously his family can tell you more about him than I can, but it was not just a family member that was talking about him. It was a number of people, and this was a devastating incident. And again, to this day, even today, with what Mr. Tonabee is saying, he's not admitting having been involved in any of this. He's saying whatever role he played, he's taking responsibility for, but he's not taking responsibility for running over two people, for doing absolutely nothing to him, and for hitting another young man over the head.